Hello, I'm Allison Buddy, and I'm pleased to be able to connect with you, the members of the Institute for Continued Learning. I'm grateful for the Phil Hanni Scholar Award, and I've been looking forward to sharing my work with you. Today, I'm going to share my story, and I'm going to tell you about my research and my current and future projects. I was born creative. I'm a dancer, an actor, and a writer, and in retrospect, I feel for my parents. My mom was afraid I'd never get along in the world, so when she graduated from law school when I was 16, she took me to work with her. I retired from a long career as a trial paralegal and started a children's acting, improvisation, and storytelling theater. Wonderland Playhouse provided after-school programs and teacher trainings for the Orange County Department of Education. My contracts evaporated in the crash of 2010, and we moved to the Pacific Northwest, where I published a children's book and returned to work in education support. Then I got lucky. For the past 18 months, I've had the great good fortune to return to college and find my voice. I will complete a college degree I began 40 years ago, and I'm deeply grateful to this university for its support. So my story aligns with the values of the Institute for Continued Learning. This presentation is about the Liberal Arts Research Collaborative, or LARC, project I completed last summer, and also about some of the work I've done this school year. The LARC project is a literature review and intervention centered in the rhetorical relationship between teachers and students. It is an exploration that attempts to square my life's experience as a creative with what I witnessed at the school where I worked as an office manager. I had taught dance, acting, and improvisation to students who were engaged and passionate. But what I saw in the elementary school was different. I saw kids acting out in hostile ways and stressing everyone out in the process. While many kids start kindergarten nervous and excited the first day of school, some of them struggle for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes it's language, or culture, or social emotional growth. I watched 5- and 6-year-olds turn violent, throw desks and chairs, punch, hit, kick, scream, and swear like no one I'd ever heard before, including myself. And because I worked in administration, I knew classroom behaviors had become a national concern, prompting much professional development to address them. Most teachers teach because they love kids and believe they are the most qualified professionals to help them. But the teachers at my school felt exhausted, dispirited, and inadequately trained for what they faced in their classrooms. I struggled with reconciling my experience with theirs, and I worried about issues of silence and voice in young people. So I dove into the study of creativity at school. Sir Ken Robinson, who was knighted by the Queen for his work in creativity and education, presented Do Schools Kill Creativity, a talk that remains the most popular TED Talk after nearly 15 years. It's been viewed almost 65 million times. Maybe you've seen it. Sir Ken talks about standardization and how the focus on high-stakes testing negatively affects creativity. When I reviewed the literature, I didn't find researchers who fundamentally disagreed with him. So this is where I began, and my findings are a good news, bad news report. I'm going to start with a definition, a misunderstanding, and something disturbing. Scholars argue about the definition and scope of creativity, but generally agree it is an idea or product that is original and useful within a certain context, which might mean an iPhone that affects the lives of millions, or it might mean a delicious soup you concoct for your dinner. Researchers agree there are many cognitive processes that make up creativity, and divergent thought is the one they focus on because psychometric tests can be developed to measure it. Convergent and divergent thought are important to this work, so let's define those. Convergent thought is the single answer, a process that involves having knowledge, sorting through it, and recalling the correct answer. Divergent thought is the many answer, and it involves wondering about ideas and having the courage and the ability to communicate them. There's a misunderstanding between what people believe about creativity. Studies show that people associate creativity with an inspiration gleaned in a defocused or dreamy state. And yet, when people describe how they actually produce something creative, they use terms like focus, hard work, and persistence. The iPhone may have come to its designer as an inspiration, but it took a lot of hard work to put one in your hand. So there's a common misunderstanding that relates creativity to lazy thinking, which may explain why it's not taken more seriously. What's really disturbing is that creativity quickly evaporates. A divergence test originally developed for NASA was given to kindergartners, and it showed that 98% test in the genius range. By fourth grade, those testing as genius divergent thinkers has dwindled to 30%, 12% by high school, and most adults test at around 2%. So we're born creative, but our creativity is nearly gone by the time we're in high school. Researchers know that this is caused by our system of education, which was designed in the 1800s to meet the needs of industrialism, and it has not significantly changed since then. And I know you're thinking, that doesn't make sense, because we've come a long way since our economy relied on manufacturing. Still, our schools teach to the test as more and more standardized assessments favor convergent thinking, competition, compliance, and conformity, and marginalize those who think differently or more slowly, aren't fluent in English, don't understand the instructions, or simply can't sit still. Today, standardized tests begin in kindergarten, before students can read and while they're still learning how to hold a pencil. Maybe you can remember the excitement you felt about starting school. Perhaps you had older siblings and you couldn't wait to join them in the cafeteria or on the playground. Some of us still don't sleep the night before the first day of school. And many of us can also remember a time when we tried to fit in, but ended up feeling wrong or stupid. What we didn't know is that most students are afraid of being wrong, a fear that is nurtured by convergent thinking, which makes all but one answer wrong. These isolating experiences result in trauma and resistance that shows up as withdrawal and fighting back. Researchers now know that trauma can live in the body and that it can contribute to disengagement and to mental and physical health issues which are on the rise in young people. This can unfairly label 12 years of a young person's life, which seems like a harsh punishment for something that happens when a person is 5. I also looked into creativity at work. I found that since the beginning of this century, business leaders say the most important competencies they need to address globalization in an uncertain future are creativity, innovation, collaboration, and communication. All skills standardization ignores. So we aren't helping students develop their inherent gifts for a world that needs them. Finally, the good news and the intervention I propose. Like all thought processes, creativity benefits from practice to develop it. Acting improvisation was developed by Viola Spolin in the late 1930s when she worked for the WPA and she wanted to unlock creativity in the marginalized immigrant children she worked with. Her seminal work, Improvisation for the Theater, first published in 1963, is considered the Bible of improvisation theory and practice. You may have seen comedy improv, which is a lot of talking and being funny. Theater improvisation is different. It is problem solving done silently in groups with very few rules, and it feels like play. And the transformative part is there are no wrong answers. Yes, and is the only valid response. Yes, an agreement with what is offered, and something added to further the play. My work focuses on helping teachers use improvisation in the classroom to practice creative competencies. So I decided to create a documentary film that chronicles a teacher's journey learning to use improv. I got started with the program in January, and we were scheduled to bring in a film crew on April 1st, and then the pandemic closed schools. But we did get started, and here are some clips from the teacher and principal talking about what they saw after our early sessions.
Today I saw one child who I would have called shy, who I didn't think liked to have any attention on her. But today, when she was asked to get up and throw a baseball in slow motion, she strode confidently into the middle of the floor and she threw it, and she had her shoulders back and she just walked back to the audience as if it was nothing. And I thought that when you called on her, I thought she would shrink down in her chair and refuse to do it, but I was really surprised. This seems to be bringing out a side to the kids that I have not seen. And some of the kids who struggle academically, who don't want to be called on, they can shine in this because this is a totally different arena.
It was highly engaged. Those 45 minutes, I mean, there was not one student not participating. I was amazed, not participating, not following, not their eyes were on the instructor. So, and I think that's due to a calm expectation setting and being clued into more visual and less harp, harp, harp.
Research that looks at using improvisation in the classroom is encouraging. It shows that these skills are transferable to other subjects. Students can use divergent thinking in math and science, in history, and in writing. And working creatively reinvigorates teachers, addressing the problem of their job satisfaction, which is at an all-time low. I learned that scholarly work in improvisation focuses on secondary school. Creativity researchers at Johns Hopkins University told me they didn't know of anyone doing this work at the elementary level. And I think that's unfortunate because young people are naturally creative. All we need to do is help them develop these skills, and in the process, teachers develop them too. I believe that if we begin in elementary school, instead of creativity evaporating by high school, students will develop a viable alternative thought process by 5th grade. This will also allow young people a voice from their earliest school days. I know this is a bold statement, but now, more than ever, I believe the rhetorical relationships in classrooms silence young people and marginalizes them. Education is seen as a way up for marginalized classes, but education as it exists today doesn't meet the needs of young people or the world they will inherit. Currently, we tell children where to be, what to do, when to do it, and what the right answer is, and we don't always take the time to listen to them. So, in addition to the documentary film, I decided to produce a podcast that foregrounds youth voices. Let's listen.
Hello, and welcome to the Creativity in a Minute podcast, a product of the Wonderland Project where we know all people are creative and that creativity may not always be appreciated in school. I'm your host, Steve Buddy, and this is podcast number 1. Today on the podcast, we meet Ethan, a creative musician who spent his early school years sitting at a desk facing the wall, far away from his classmates, because his teacher said he was a distraction to himself and others.
At first, I was kind of confused because I didn't think I had ever done anything wrong, but I realized that apparently I wasn't allowed to talk to other people and be friendly and be silly and fun all at once. I had to kind of sit down and shut up and listen, and I never really...
Beginning at the age of 5, the classroom has an important rhetorical influence on a person. The relationships between teachers, students, and peers constructs identities. The Wonderland Project's Creativity in a Minute podcast is produced for busy teachers and addresses the issues of voice, listening, persona, and identity in conversations with young people who talk about how they resolve their creativity with their education. The podcast is a series of short ethnographies that ask 3 questions of young people under the age of 23. First, what was elementary school like for you? Second, what did it feel like when you found your creativity, your art, your sport, your passion? And third, how did that creativity interact with your education? All of my life, I have experienced how individuality and creativity are subverted to an institutional concept of what success means, both in the classroom and at work. College wasn't an option for me when I was young because I was a dancer and I was told I would never make any money. I know what it feels like to de-identify with my most personal gifts because they have no value. And I have observed how this process constructs anxiety, identity, and voice in young people. Rarely are young people allowed to express themselves freely in school, and when they do, we don't seriously listen to them. Instead, they face 3 rhetorical choices: to comply, to resist, or to withdraw into silence. Because the primary relationship in education is between teachers and students, I have chosen to focus my work there. The increasing demands since No Child Left Behind have left teachers exhausted with little time to develop learning relationships with their students. Voice and listening are fundamental to communication, and my project has two targets. First, it gives young people a safe space to speak their stories uninterrupted. And second, it hopes that teachers will locate themselves within those stories and compassionately reconsider how they show up. During the interviews, I learned that the array of individual experience was more diverse than I could have imagined. It truly is the case that everyone is unique, and that uniqueness cannot be understated. In this unpredictable world, it is short-sighted to ignore personal talents in favor of an outdated model. We are no longer an industrialized society. We are global, we are diverse, and we are faced with challenges that industrialism and capitalism cannot solve. But creativity and innovation can begin to address those challenges. In fact, they are the only things that can. I have recorded 6 podcasts, and I plan to continue with this project. In these conversations, I heard stories of punishment, isolation, struggle, and identity construction. This is Justice from the 3rd podcast.
Socially, it wasn't the greatest because there was no minorities there. I'm Shawnee Creek in Choctaw. My people are from like Ohio and that area, Oklahoma. So I don't have like a lot of connections with the kids there. So it was definitely difficult in that aspect, going through school. But when the people I'm hanging out with, like my friends, we're all white. So at one point, like I wanted to be a white kid.
I heard something surprising about resistance that gave me hope. I heard that stubbornness protects creativity. And although I advocate for a system that helps students develop their creativity instead of one that is just an obstacle for them to push against, there is constructive power in resistance. Again, here is Ethan.
I would say something or I would do something and I get a laugh from the group and a disappointing look from the teacher. And to me, that was the best. I continually tried to learn how to push people's buttons.
I kind of grew up being told not to do things, and so of course I did them.
And I heard about childhood trauma. This is Zia from the upcoming 4th podcast.
From pre-K to half of 3rd grade, I was in the foster care system. And so I was being switched out of homes and switched out of schools every time someone else thought that was fit for me. So it was very difficult to be reintroduced to material I was very familiar with, or exposed to content that I had never seen before that people my same age were already elite at. I was really good at certain things and really bad at others, but it was out of my control. Being transitioned from all of these schools where I could act up, do whatever, swear at a young age, make provocative jokes that I had been taught, and then just be switched to another school. So it doesn't matter how I act. If you don't like it, no problem. I'll be gone in like 2 weeks anyway. So it developed this hard exterior shell.
And I heard true resilience in the stories of what young people plan for the future. Again, this is Justice.
Because my family doesn't come from like wealth or anything, we don't know stuff about business. A lot of the minority communities, same way, we don't understand like a lot of these different business things because we haven't been put in situations or had the opportunities to get into those positions. So I want to teach minorities and like underprivileged kids, even white kids that are impoverished. I want to build a school to teach them how to create wealth.
And this is Sova.
I'm definitely going to keep playing music. That's never going to stop, whether it's privately or publicly. I want my music to bring people together.
Though certainly not predominant, there is an effort to evolve communication from grand sweeping narratives towards collaborative conversations with those who have been marginalized on issues that impact them. Even so, young people are continually excluded from those conversations, even as they are destined to inherit the problems we have created. On the other hand, we hear the youth voice rising, and we see and hear the resilience and stubbornness in global youth activist movements. In the world I might create, important conversations would occur at the most fundamental level, with young people consulted as to how to best educate them, how to address their health and welfare, and how to care for their earth. This begins with how we speak to them and the success of my world depends on whether or not we listen to them. Going forward, I hope to write a book introducing improvisation to teachers to help them develop creative skills in themselves and their students. The documentary film, the podcast, my blog, and my children's books would all be support materials for the book project, the Wonderland Project. Thank you. I feel I embody the spirit of the Institute for Continued Learning, and I thank you all for your support.
The Wonderland Project provides support and materials for teachers who want to help their students develop creative competencies. Thank you for joining us for the second episode of the Creativity in a Minute podcast. Our producer is Allison Buddy. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ethan Buddy. More information is available at AllisonBuddy.com.